Ash drifted through the air like snowflakes, settling over the ruins of what was once New York City. Towering skyscrapers were now skeletal husks, and the roads, cracked and blackened, bore the scars of relentless bombardments. Captain Darius Jones crouched behind a chunk of concrete, his battered exosuit hissing as it adjusted to his movements. The faint glow of a Zarnville patrol hovered in the distance, their unearthly hum a constant reminder of humanity's humiliating fall. It wasn't supposed to end this way. Jones's gloved fingers traced the edge of his rifle as he scanned the horizon. His once pristine armor was streaked with soot and dried blood, a grim testament to a war humanity could not win. The Zarnville, a biologically superior species with advanced technology, had come without warning. Their sleek, insectoid ships darkened the skies, spewing destruction on a scale Earth had never seen. But it wasn't their weapons that sealed humanity's fate. It was their hive mind. They thought and acted as one, overwhelming Earth's fractured nations before a united response could form. It had been 6 years since the war began. 4 or 5 of those, humanity fought tooth and nail, throwing everything they had at the invaders. For every Zarnville soldier that fell, 10 humans died. Jones had been there at the siege of Berlin when the United Earth Command made its final, desperate push. He could still hear the screams, still see the skies lit up by alien energy blasts as the Zarnville crushed the resistance. He'd been there when Earth surrendered. Now! Scattered pockets of survivors hid in underground bunkers, eking out a miserable existence. The Zarnville controlled the surface, enslaving humans for labor or experimentation. Jones had seen firsthand what happened to those who resisted. They were turned into grotesque biomachines, their bodies warped into tools for the hive. But Jones wasn't dead. Not yet. Behind him, General Marcus Steele's voice crackled over the comms. "Captain, report." Jones pressed 2 fingers to his temple, activating the communicator. "Sector is clear. Zarnville patrols are thinning out." His voice was steady, though every word tasted bitter. "Good," Steele replied, his tone clipped. "The Scorcher initiative is moving to Phase 2. Extraction in 5. Don't get caught." Phase 2. Jones's jaw tightened. He had heard whispers of the program, a last-ditch effort by Earth's remnants to turn the tide. No one knew exactly what it entailed, but the rumors were grim. Experiments, enhancements, sacrifices. "You trust him?" a voice asked from behind. Jones turned to see Sergeant Victor Holt, his broad frame silhouetted against the orange glow of a distant fire. Holt's face was a mess of scars, each one earned in battles they'd barely survived. "Trust doesn't matter," Jones replied, rising to his feet. "He's the only one still fighting." Holt spat, his expression sour. "Fighting? Or playing God? Steele's got plans, sure, but I don't think they involve us walking out of this alive." Jones didn't argue. There was no point. The low hum of engines drew their attention skyward. A battered dropship descended through the haze, its thrusters kicking up clouds of ash. Jones and Holt sprinted toward it, the weight of their gear slowing them only slightly. The ship's hatch opened, revealing Lieutenant Alex Thorne at the controls. "You two look like hell," Thorne quipped, his wiry frame outlined by the dim interior lights. His sharp green eyes flicked to Jones. "Let me guess. Steele's got more suicide missions lined up?" "Something like that," Jones replied, stepping aboard. As the hatch sealed shut, the ship lurched into the sky, its engines whining. Jones leaned against the cold metal wall, his mind churning. Steele had promised a way to strike back, but the cost was becoming clearer with each passing day. "Think this Phase 2 will work?" Thorne asked, breaking the silence. Jones met his gaze. "It doesn't matter if it works. It's all we've got." Thorne nodded, though his expression was grim. They all knew what was at stake. The dropship docked at an underground facility deep beneath the Appalachian Mountains. As they disembarked, Steele was waiting, flanked by heavily armed guards. The general was an imposing figure, his sharp features and gray-streaked hair giving him an almost statuesque quality. "Captain Jones." Sergeant Holt, Lieutenant Thorne, Steele said, his voice as cold as the air in the chamber. Welcome to the next chapter of humanity's fight for survival. And what chapter is that? Holt asked, his tone dripping with skepticism. Steele's lips curled into a thin smile. The chapter where we stop fighting like men and start fighting like gods. Behind him, a massive reinforced door hissed open, revealing a laboratory bathed in sterile white light. Rows of tanks lined the walls, each containing a humanoid figure suspended in glowing fluid. Jones's stomach churned at the sight. These are prototypes, Steele explained, gesturing to the tanks. Human soldiers enhanced with biomechanical augmentations. Faster, stronger, ruthless, Thorne echoed, his brow furrowing. Emotion is a liability, Steele said bluntly. Empathy, hesitation, fear, they cost us the war. These soldiers are designed to operate without such weaknesses. Jones stepped forward, his gaze fixed on the figures in the tanks. You're saying we become what? Machines? Not machines, Steele replied. Weapons. The Zarnville won because they are unified, efficient, and unrelenting. To beat them, we must become something they can't predict. Something more dangerous than they are. And if we refuse? Holt asked, his voice low. Steele's smile didn't waver. You won't, because deep down, you know this is the only way. Jones stared at the figures in the tanks, their lifeless eyes closed. He thought of the billions who had died, of the cities reduced to rubble, of the boy he'd lost in the early days of the war. The Zarnville had taken everything, and if becoming a weapon meant taking it back, then so be it. The door hissed shut behind them, sealing their fate. The screams were the first thing Jones remembered. Sharp and piercing, they cut through the haze of unconsciousness like a blade. His body felt like it was on fire, every nerve ablaze as if molten metal coursed through his veins. When his eyes snapped open, the sterile white light of the laboratory flooded his senses, and he struggled to breathe. Vitals are stabilizing. A voice echoed nearby, clinical and detached. Cognitive functions intact. Proceeding with phase synchronization. Jones's fingers twitched. The muscles in his arms flexed involuntarily, and he felt something alien embedded deep beneath his skin. He tried to move, but restraints bound him to the operating table. Slowly, his senses sharpened, and he began to notice the faint hum of machinery, the rhythmic beeping of monitors, and the icy sting of needles buried in his flesh. What did you do to me? His voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. General Steele's face appeared above him, calm and impassive. What was necessary, Captain? Jones tried to lurch forward, but the restraints held firm. Necessary? I feel like I've been ripped apart and stitched back together. You have, Steele said bluntly. You're no longer just a man, Jones. You're humanity's weapon, and soon you'll understand what that means. Jones gritted his teeth. But before he could respond, a sharp jolt coursed through his body. His vision blurred, then sharpened to a degree he'd never experienced. He could see every minute crack in the ceiling tiles, every tiny detail of Steele's weathered face. His hearing heightened, catching conversations from across the room. Technical jargon, status reports, and faint murmurs of awe from the scientists monitoring him. You're adjusting faster than expected, Steele noted. Impressive. The restraints released with a soft click, and Jones sat up, his movements eerily fluid. He glanced down at his hands, now reinforced with faintly glowing veins of synthetic alloy. His body felt stronger, faster, but there was something else, something unsettling. Where's my team? He demanded. Follow me, Steele said, ignoring the question's heat. Jones slid off the table, his bare feet hitting the cold metal floor with a strange sense of weightlessness. As he followed Steele through the labyrinthine corridors of the facility, his enhanced senses continued to overwhelm him. The faint buzz of fluorescent lights, the murmur of distant voices, the rhythmic thrum of generators. It all blended into a cacophony that his mind struggled to process. They entered a large, dimly lit chamber. Rows of figures stood at attention, their faces shadowed but familiar. Holt, Thorne, and Ward were among them, clad in sleek black armor that seemed to pulse with an inner light. The sight of them brought a pang of relief, but it was fleeting. "Captain," Steele said, gesturing to the group, "meet your squad." Jones stepped closer, noting the subtle changes in his comrades. Holt's once weathered features now seemed sharper, his eyes colder. Thorne stood with unnerving stillness, his usual smirk replaced by a blank expression. Ward, the youngest among them, looked almost unrecognizable, his lean frame now imposing and rigid. "Jones," Holt said, his voice flat but layered with an edge that hadn't been there before. "They got to you too, huh?" "Looks like it," Jones replied, his tone uneasy. "How do you feel?" "Like a goddamn machine," Thorne muttered, his voice lacking its usual humor. "Machines don't feel pain," Ward said quietly, flexing his fingers. This feels like something worse." Before Jones could respond, Steele stepped between them. "Enough. You've all undergone enhancements designed to maximize combat efficiency. Your bodies have been upgraded with biomechanical augmentations. Your neural pathways accelerated to improve reflexes and decision-making. In short, you are now the deadliest soldiers humanity has ever produced." "And what did it cost us?" Jones asked, his voice low. "Everything." Steele replied without hesitation. The room fell silent. Moments later, a klaxon blared, red lights flooding the chamber. Steele turned sharply to the nearest console, his expression hardening. "Perfect timing. Zarnville patrols have breached the outer perimeter. This is your first mission, soldiers. Let's see what you can do." Jones's squad moved in unison, their movements synchronized as if guided by an unseen force. As they ascended to the surface, Jones felt the cold, damp air hit his face. The ruins of the facility's exterior stretched out before them, and beyond that, the alien patrol, 6 insectoid creatures with glowing carapaces, their spindly legs gliding across the terrain. "Engage," Steele's voice commanded through their comms. The squad responded without hesitation. Thorne's sniper rifle fired with mechanical precision, a single round piercing an alien's head before it even registered the attack. Holt charged forward, his augmented strength allowing him to rip a Zarnville drone apart with his bare hands. Jones moved instinctively, his enhanced reflexes guiding him as he outmaneuvered 2 aliens, dispatching them with brutal efficiency. The fight was over in seconds. As Jones stood among the lifeless alien corpses, his chest heaving, he realized he felt nothing. No adrenaline, no fear, no satisfaction, just a cold, detached focus. He looked at his team, their faces similarly emotionless, and felt a flicker of unease. "Mission complete." Steele's voice crackled over the comms. "Return to base. Debriefing in 1 hour." Back underground, the squad sat in silence, the weight of what they'd become sinking in. Holt finally broke the quiet. "They took more than our fear," he said, his voice bitter. "They took our humanity. We're still human," Jones replied, though the words felt hollow. "Are we?" Thorne asked, his gaze distant. Ward, who hadn't spoken since the mission, finally looked up. "It doesn't matter what we are. All that matters is that we win." Jones wanted to argue, to push back against the cold logic in Ward's words. But deep down, he knew it was true. Humanity's survival depended on them, no matter the cost. The air smelled of scorched earth and ozone as Captain Darius Jones and his squad emerged from the shadows of the ruined industrial complex. For the first time in years, they were not retreating. They were hunting. "Target confirmed." Lieutenant Alex Thorne's voice crackled in Jones's earpiece. He perched atop a crumbling smokestack, his augmented eyes locked onto a distant Zarnville outpost. 20 combatants. 2 commanders. Standard patrol rotation. "Any civilians?" Jones asked, his tone sharp. Thorne hesitated for half a beat. "Negative. All clear." Jones nodded, motioning to the others. Victor, flank the north entrance. Jace, cover the south. Thorn, take out the commanders on my signal. We strike fast and leave nothing standing. Sergeant Victor Holt hefted his plasma launcher, his hulking frame moving with surprising agility for a man his size. Copy that, he growled, his voice as unyielding as the reinforced armor he wore. Private Jace Ward was already moving, his live form disappearing into the rubble. Ready when you are, Captain, came his cool reply. The Zarnville outpost was little more than a makeshift base, its alien architecture clashing grotesquely with the skeletal remains of a human factory. Jones observed the alien patrols through his enhanced optics, their insectoid movements precise and unrelenting. Every step the Zarnville took seemed to echo humanity's failures, a reminder of how thoroughly they had been dominated. But this wasn't the same war. Execute, Jones ordered. Thorn's rifle fired with a deafening crack, the sound swallowed almost instantly by its silencer. The first Zarnville commander crumpled, a clean hole through its glowing skull. The second never had time to react before Thorn's second shot ended it. Jones surged forward, his squad striking with ruthless precision. Holt's launcher obliterated a group of Zarnville drones in a fiery explosion, their carapaces shattered like glass. Ward's twin blade sliced through alien limbs, his movements so fluid they seemed almost choreographed. Jones's own rifle barked as he picked off targets with unerring accuracy, his cybernetic implants calculating trajectories faster than his mind could process. Within minutes, the outpost was silent. The Zarnville forces lay in pieces, their strange, bioluminescent blood pooling beneath the rubble. Jones surveyed the carnage, his face impassive. Good work. Thorn, gather intel from the command station. Holt, Ward, secure the perimeter. As the team moved to carry out his orders, Jones approached the remains of a Zarnville commander. He knelt beside the lifeless form, studying its intricate armor and the faint, flickering glow of its neural node. The Zarnville weren't just soldiers. They were extensions of a greater whole, pieces of a hive mind that spanned entire star systems. Captain, Thorn's voice cut through his thoughts. You're going to want to see this. Jones joined Thorn at the command station, a jury-rigged console glowing with alien glyphs. Thorn tapped a few keys, translating the data with his implants. A holographic map flickered to life, showing a network of Zarnville installations. At the center was a massive structure unlike anything they had encountered before. That, Thorn said, pointing to the glowing central node, is their hive nexus. From what I can tell, it's the nerve center for this entire region. Take it out, and we sever their connection to the hive mind. Jones studied the map, his mind racing. The nexus was heavily fortified, surrounded by layers of defenses that made their previous missions look like warm-ups. But if Thorn was right, destroying it could cripple the Zarnville in this sector and give humanity its first real victory in years. We don't have the firepower for this, Holt said, joining them. Even with what we've got, we'd be walking into a meat grinder. We don't need firepower, Ward interjected, his voice calm and precise. We need to think like them. Hit fast, hit hard, and don't give them time to react. Jones nodded. Ward's right. If we can infiltrate the Nexus, we might have a chance. But we'll need intel, and we'll need it fast. As they debated tactics, a voice crackled over the comms. Captain Jones' report. It was Steele. We've located a potential target, sir, Jones replied. A hive nexus that could disrupt the Zarnville network in this region. There was a pause before Steele responded, his tone laced with both approval and warning. Proceed with caution, Captain. But remember, failure is not an option. We can't afford another loss. Jones clenched his jaw. Understood, sir. As the comms went silent, Jones turned back to his squad. We move at dawn. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we take the fight to them. The following morning, the squad stood on a ridge overlooking the Nexus. The structure was massive, its spire-like towers pulsating with an eerie blue light. Swarms of Zarnval drones moved in perfect unison, their patrols forming an almost impenetrable web of defense. "Thorn, targets?" Jones asked, his voice steady. "Marking them now," Thorn replied, his visor flashing as he designated priority targets. "Holt, take out the North Tower. Ward, you're with me. We'll breach the main entrance once the tower's down." The plan was simple in theory, but Jones knew better than to underestimate the Zarnval. One mistake, one moment of hesitation, and they'd all be dead or worse. "On my mark," Jones said, gripping his rifle tightly. The assault was chaos, the squad moving with a level of precision that belied the overwhelming odds. Holt's launcher took out the tower in a deafening explosion, throwing the Zarnval into momentary disarray. Jones and Ward charged through the breach, their enhanced reflexes allowing them to dodge incoming fire and cut down enemies with brutal efficiency. But the Zarnval adapted quickly. Drones poured from hidden alcoves, their weapons lashing out with deadly energy. For every alien they killed, two more seemed to take its place. "Captain, we're pinned." Thorn's voice came through, strained but controlled. Jones gritted his teeth. "Hold your position. We're almost there." As they pushed deeper into the nexus, Jones felt a strange sensation, an almost imperceptible hum at the edge of his consciousness. It was as if the hive mind itself was aware of their presence, reacting to their every move. Finally, they reached the core chamber. A massive, pulsating node dominated the room, its surface alive with alien energy. Jones raised his rifle, his squad falling into formation behind him. "This is it," he said, his voice resolute. He aimed, his finger tightening on the trigger. The core chamber pulsed with an unnatural rhythm, its glow bathing the squad in an eerie blue light. Captain Darius Jones steadied his breathing, his finger hovering over the trigger of his rifle. Behind him, Holt, Thorn, and Ward formed a defensive semicircle, their weapons trained on the entrances. The hum in Jones's mind intensified, growing into a low, resonant buzz. The hive was aware of them now, not just the drones outside, but the collective consciousness that connected every Zarnval. He could feel it probing, pressing against the edges of his thoughts like tendrils of cold smoke. "Jones," Holt growled, his deep voice cutting through the tension. "We've got incoming. A lot of it." Before Jones could respond, the first wave of Zarnval drones surged through the corridors. Their chittering cries echoed like a swarm of angry locusts, their movements unnervingly fast. Thorn fired, his shots clean and precise, each one finding its mark. Holt's plasma launcher roared, filling the air with the acrid scent of burning alien flesh. Ward moved like a shadow, his twin blades slicing through drones with mechanical precision. But even with their augmented abilities, the squad was outnumbered. "Jones, that core isn't going to destroy itself," Thorn shouted over the din. Jones turned to the node, its surface rippling with energy. Destroying it would sever the Zarnval's control in this region, giving humanity a sliver of hope. But as he raised his rifle, the hum in his mind spiked, nearly bringing him to his knees. "You are too late, human." The voice wasn't audible. It was inside his head, cold and alien. Jones clenched his jaw, refusing to falter. "Ward, cover me," he barked, stepping closer to the node. Ward spun to intercept a pair of drones, his blades flashing. "You've got 30 seconds, Captain." "Make them count." Jones switched his rifle to high charge mode, the weapon humming with lethal energy. He aimed at the core center, his implants calculating the trajectory for maximum damage. "You think destroying this will change anything?" The voice sneered, its tone laced with disdain. "We are infinite. We are inevitable." "Yeah," Jones muttered through gritted teeth. "So are we." He fired. The impact was immediate. The core erupted in a blinding flash, its energy surging outward in a shockwave that slammed into Jones and the others. The ground trembled, and the walls groaned under the strain. "Jones, the whole place is coming down." Thorn yelled, his voice barely audible over the cacophony. "Fall back." Jones ordered, his voice hoarse. The squad moved as one, fighting their way back through the collapsing corridors. Drones still poured in, their attacks frantic and uncoordinated, a stark contrast to their usual precision. The destruction of the Nexus had severed their link to the hive mind, turning them into little more than wild animals. Holt's launcher barked, clearing a path through the debris. Thorne picked off stragglers, his sharp eyes scanning for threats. Ward took the rear, his blades ensuring no drone got close enough to strike. They burst out onto the surface just as the Nexus collapsed in on itself, the massive structure imploding with a deafening roar. A shockwave of blue energy swept across the battlefield, knocking the remaining drones off their feet. For a moment, there was silence. Jones stood amidst the rubble, his chest heaving. His squad regrouped around him, their expressions grim but victorious. "It's done," Ward said, his voice barely above a whisper. "No," Jones replied, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "It's just beginning." Back at the underground base, the mood was tense. Steele stood at the head of the command center, his sharp eyes scanning the holographic display. Reports from other regions poured in, detailing similar strikes on Zarnville installations. "You did it, Jones," Steele said as the squad entered the room. "The destruction of that Nexus disrupted their network in this sector. The Zarnville are in disarray. For now," Jones said. His voice was steady, but there was no trace of triumph in it. Steele stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "You've given us an opportunity. We need to capitalize on it. And what's the cost this time?" Holt asked, crossing his arms. Steele's jaw tightened. "The same as it's always been. Everything." Jones met Steele's gaze, a storm of conflicting emotions swirling within him. The enhancements had made them into weapons, efficient, unrelenting, and ruthless. But each mission chipped away at what little humanity they had left. "Sir," Jones said finally, his voice hard, "if we keep fighting like this, there won't be anything left of us to save." Steele's lips thinned. "Survival demands sacrifice, Captain. You know that better than anyone." The room fell silent, the weight of Steele's words pressing down on them. Ward stepped forward, his young face hardened by everything they'd endured. "Then we make sure it's worth it." Jones glanced at his team, Thorne, Holt, Ward, all of them scarred, both physically and mentally. They weren't just soldiers anymore. They were something else, something the Zarnville couldn't anticipate. "We'll fight," Jones said, his voice resolute. "But on our terms." Steele gave a curt nod. "Then prepare yourselves. The next mission will be even harder." As the squad left the command center, Jones felt a flicker of hope. The Zarnville weren't invincible. They could be beaten. And as long as his team stood beside him, humanity still had a chance. For the first time in years, the tide was turning.